The following is a paid program, and the views expressed on this show do not represent the views of WJZ AM, Intercom Communications, its sponsors, or affiliates. This is AHA Business Radio, creating AHA moments for business, by business, and about business, providing opportunities to discover information to help you run your business and guide your decision making. The more you know, the better decisions you make. AHA Business Radio is produced by Allan Hirsh Advisors. For more information, log on to ahabusinessradio.com. To join in tonight's conversation, call 410-481-1300. Now, here's your host for AHA Business Radio, Allan Hirsh.
Good evening. Welcome to tonight's show. In the studio with me tonight is Joseph Zuccaro, and he's the president of Allinio. I hope I got those both right.
That's fine.
Okay. And I thank you for being here this evening, and welcome. We're going to be talking a lot about becoming more data-driven marketing organization. So my first question to every guest is, what motivates you to get up in the morning and go to work?
Hey, thanks, Allan. What motivates me is to try to find new things, meet new people, achieve greater goals, to always better yourself and better your business.
So how did you get started in this marketing world? I know it's been a fairly long career, not as long as mine, but fairly long career.
Right. I'm not as distinguished a gentleman as you, but I'm
not a distinguished gentleman, and there are not many people that call me that. But anyway,
I have my battle scars for business.
As you know, so do I. Anybody who's been in business probably has a few battle scars because, as I like to say, the only person that's never made a mistake is a person that's never done anything.
Sure.
So if you're in business and working for businesses, you're bound to have made mistakes, but that's how we learn.
Sure. So it started out, like any kid, I get out of college, I get a job and hop around a little. But when this whole internet thing caught on 25 years ago now, I was involved in sales, and I've had sales experience. I've been an inside sales guy. I've carried a bag, out there as an outside field rep. I've been a channel manager managing channels, and I've been a sales manager. I've also done marketing. I've been a marketing grunt, and I've also been a marketing manager in charge of people with the task of doing the marketing for an organization. And what I found over the years is that marketing does one thing, sales does another thing.
I was just going to ask, most people think of sales and marketing as the same thing, but they're really not.
They're really not. And
yet they need to work very closely together. They
need to be aligned. They need to be rowing in the same direction. They need to be joined at the hip. And I think what I discovered, when these organizations were doing two different things, it dawned on me that, hey, you got to work together. And the reality is, sales is a customer of marketing. Marketing needs to be there to help produce qualified leads for sales. I remember a time way back when, before there was an internet, when salespeople would keep track of their customers either with a Rolodex. They put their business card and staple it into the Rolodex, or they had index cards that they scribbled on. Right? That's all changed, though. That's all changed.
It was you. Everyone had their own way of. And we really didn't have spreadsheets.
Right. We didn't even have that.
Well, I remember Lotus 1, 2, 3,
and what really underscored this for me, if you think way back, who was the first department to get any automation in an enterprise? Well, generally it was either accounting or word processing. And that was in the 1980s. Then in the 1990s comes manufacturing, operations. And at the end of the 1990s, you started hearing about this stuff called, sales tracking. Like there was Goldmine software and Act software. It was the very rudimentary effort to help sales track their leads. And then in the late 1990s, early 2000s, then we had full-fledged Salesforce automation that was web-based. But the last department to get automated in the company was marketing. Why? Because marketing did all this weird stuff. They did all this warm, fuzzy stuff. It was hard to measure.
Well, it's also marketing. It reminds me when there are recessions and when companies have a downturn, first place they cut is marketing and advertising.
Yep.
Because it is like a couple other departments, but they don't think about it. It's that department that costs money.
Right. That's what they think.
Right.
But that's changing now.
Right.
That's changing now because of the web and because of the ability to track individuals when they come to your website. We can say, okay, this program cost us this much, but it generated this many leads. This many leads translated into this many opportunities, and this many opportunities closed. So we can now show the direct impact of marketing spend on revenue. That's changed everything for marketers. It really, really has.
So what is some of the data that becomes so important to understand to help a company market?
Sure. Well, I call it opportunity-related data, but what I like to do is I have a mantra that I help with my customers, and obviously it's going to sound like a no-brainer, but if you think about it, it all makes sense. Well, what drives a company? Revenue. What drives revenue? Sales. Okay. What drives sales? Marketing. What drives marketing? Data. Okay. So what kind of data? Well, data based on dialogue. Or in other words, in an internet world, interaction. What are they interacting with your digital properties, your website, your videos, your white papers, your PDF, your brochures, your various web pages, okay? But what drives that? Well, what drives that is the content. What kind of content are you creating, and what drives the content? The customer. So the first data you have to think about is, who is your customer? How do you characterize the interesting and compelling characteristics of a customer that shows someone has more of a proclivity buy than someone else? So what are those data points? Obviously, it could be their title, it could be their company, it could be their geography. So you have this data you need to collect about people. What is their role in the buying cycle? Are they a decision maker? Do they hold the purse strings? Are they an end user? Do they offer technical validation to whatever your offering is? So you have to start collecting data on people, and that can be very explicit. Like I said, what's their name? What's their title? What's their company? But there's other data out there now we can track, and that is implicit data. That is, what are they doing on your website? How long are they staying on a page? How many pages are they looking at? How often are they coming back? What are they signing up for? Did they sign up for the newsletter? Did they sign up for a webinar? Did they sign up to download a particular piece of content that is of interest to them? So over time, you're gathering this data and you're building a profile of the individual based on what they tell you and what they show you that they're doing. That's the kind of data that businesses, small and large, can collect now.
So how do they build that into creating what many people call the sales funnel?
Sure. So you have the sales funnel, and it's a great analogy. We've all used it. You call it the sales funnel, the sales pipeline. And the visual of, you start with somebody at the top, and through interactions they come through the funnel and they come down to the bottom of the funnel where sales handles them and closes them and gets a contract. I like to use a slightly different analogy. To me, it makes a lot more sense, and that's an assembly line. In the digital age, you have strangers coming to your website. We know they have an IP address. We can figure out, for the most part, is that an IP address for Comcast? Is it an IP address from a company network? So we know that people have this IP address, but we don't know who they are. So we tempt them, so to speak. We offer them information that's going to help them make a decision or do their job better. And they opt in. They give us their email address for that information. So we went from an IP address to John Doe at abccompany.com. Now we know, hey, it's John Doe and he works for ABC Company, or Sally Smith at xyzcompany.com. So now we know who they are, who they work for. At that point, we want to gather more information. We want to gather their behavior. And over time, we have other offerings like, hey, come to this webinar, register for this webinar, we'll ask for their title. Maybe we'll ask for their phone number. Maybe we'll ask for their address. Not too much information because people don't like giving too much information at once. It's cumbersome.
They don't like, but
Right.
if you know what's been going on with Facebook and
Right. But
with all that data that's out there.
And that has been accumulated
Google.
over a great period of time, a great amount of time. So the whole point is you get to a point where certain behaviors should alert you that, hey, here's a person that is coming to our product page and, oh, they also clicked onto our pricing page. We want to, if they've done that a couple times and they've done other things like download a case study, then we want to alert a salesperson to get in touch with them. So this whole idea of assembly line, we're piecing together all this data and we're putting flesh on a person.
Well, once we put flesh on the person, we need to go to the first commercial break.
Okay.
So as we do, or as we come back, I will continue the conversation with Joseph Zuccaro, and we'll continue talking about marketing and data. I'm Allan Hirsh of Allan Hirsh Advisors, and this is AHA Business Radio on CBS Sports Radio 1300 AM.
Now back to AHA Business Radio, creating AHA moments for business, by business, and about business. Once again, here's your host, Allan Hirsh.
Welcome back to the show. I'm in the studio with Joseph Zuccaro. He is the president of Allian. I said I'd get it out.
Allinio.
Allinio. I apologize.
It's okay.
It's all those vowels. What can I tell you? But anyway, if you have any questions for Joe or myself, give us a call, 410-481-1300. So we were talking about the kind of data that you can gather.
Yes.
During the first segment. So what's the next step? And you were talking a little bit about the assembly line of how do you use it and build upon what you have to, the first thing, as you said, was the the email address and building that to create a profile. So what's the importance of having all of this, and how do you use it?
Sure. Well, I would say, the important thing to remember is we said way back when the big boss of a company you could hear him say, everybody's a salesperson, right? And that implied everyone from the admin assistant and the receptionist to the salespeople themselves, of course, to the C-level. But I'm also saying, hey, everybody's a data gatherer. It is imperative that people that are at different touch points with the customer have to be able to extract data from that customer that will help the enterprise in determining whether or not we can upsell that customer, we can renew that customer, et cetera. And the important thing is you need to share that data. You need to get the data out of silos and across the enterprise because different departments may need to use that data about a customer. So it's very important that happens. But at this point, because these platforms exist for marketing and sales to use, marketing and sales are probably the best stewards of that data. You don't want to leave it with accounting. You don't want to leave it with a customer service organization as much as marketing and sales, because they're going to need to get back to that data in the hope of selling something else to the customer.
If it's but shouldn't the I assume, but as you say, breaking down the silos, all of this data is being gathered, should be gathered from all ends, pulling together the sales and marketing information data along with its existing client, along with the financial data and the data on what they've bought, how often they buy it. So if you have this CRM system, customer relationship management system, you can track it. For example, if you're in the stationery business and someone orders a carton of copier paper every 3 months, it should pop up.
Yes.
To call them and say, look, I noticed you haven't ordered it. Do you need it? Or whatever the comment is.
Exactly.
This is all data needed.
Right.
To improve the enterprise.
You have to make sure that your platforms have the ability to alert the right person at the right time. That's what's important, because too many times I've heard horror stories of a customer being on credit hold, but the customer service organization doesn't even know it. So they still deliver a service to a customer that's a deadbeat. And then like you say, a customer that's up for renewal, they're happy, but they don't know that their contract's about to terminate because they're worrying about other things, and nobody's reminded them. So you lose out on the contract.
It also depends on the contract. If
Sure.
it's an automatic renewal with a negative, with a negative,
that always helps.
You don't want to do that. But that's about. On the other hand, it's about building trust with clients.
Sure.
Which I believe in doing. But there are contracts out there that automatically renew because everyone forgets about them.
Yeah. I mean, but don't take that for granted. It doesn't always happen that way.
I know.
We still have things that fall through the cracks.
So talk a little bit more about the content, the persona that your information that you're getting and how to use it.
Sure. Well, it all starts with the buyer persona. Who are you selling to? And the analogy I like to use is the crime movie, right? You have a serial killer out there, and you got to figure out who this person is. And the police department hires a profiler. What does a profiler do? He gets in the head of the bad guy. Why? Because they want to figure out, where is that bad guy going to strike again? And not that we're going to kill anyone, but we're in business, right? We're trying to sell to people. But we got to get in the head of the customer and understand where or when is that person going to buy again. So to understand who the customer is and create a character called the buyer persona, who they are, what drives them, who do they turn to for validation, what keeps them up at night, what is their expertise, to really understand who your buyer is. That allows you to create a value proposition to that person. And most, especially in a B2B environment, most buying organizations, it's not just necessarily one person making a decision. You could be a small business selling to a very complex buying organization where you're dealing with various buyer personas. So where this goes to content is pieces of content, whether it's a brochure or a web page, are geared towards different audiences. You could have a beautiful brochure, but if it's geared toward the end user and not the president of the company who has the purse strings and makes the decision, you may not be appealing to that person to make the decision in your favor. So understanding who the buyer persona is, what the value proposition to that buyer persona is, and weaving that messaging into various content for the various players. Like I said, the technical validator, the purse string holder, the end user, the head honcho, whoever that person is your content geared towards them? And at what stage of the buying process? What kind of information do you have that describes to people a problem that maybe they don't know they have? If you just tell people you have a problem, well, they'll say, I don't have a problem. But if you frame content in a way that helps them think critically, they may come to the conclusion, hey, yeah, I do have a problem based on what I read on this checklist of things to do, or how you have an XYZ problem. So the content could appear at various stages because what do people do? First of all, they realize I got a problem. They define the problem. Then they figure, okay, what are the solutions out there for this problem? Then they figure out maybe there's a couple different processes or technologies that will help them solve the problem. Then they go, well, who are the vendors out there that will give me this problem, will solve this problem for me, and how do I select them? So they go through this whole buying stage, and you need to be ready to have the right answers at the right time for these people, so they're aware that they have a problem, that they gravitate towards the type of solution you have, and that they gravitate towards you as opposed to your competitors when it comes to deciding on that particular solution.
So what helps them want to gravitate to you? In other words, if you're a business, what are some of the marketing processes using the data and the information that you have to attract those targeted markets, those targeted people? What gives them the incentive, and I don't like that word, what helps you communicate with them so that they want to work with you rather than somebody else?
Okay. Well, first of all, it's once again the value of the content. If you know how to segment your market You could have technical buyers, you could have financial buyers, whoever that is. You could have buyers in a certain geography, buyers of a certain title, certain rank within the firm. If you know who you're segmenting and that content is geared towards them, but ultimately the content needs to do, I like to say, one of two things. It helps them make a particular decision, or it just helps them do their overall job somehow. That if I find content useful, I'm going to turn to that company again. Eventually, I'm going to have a rapport with them. I'm going to trust them. And when it comes time to making a decision, and I need to talk to a salesperson, I will be more liable to believe in that salesperson because, hey, they've steered me right all this time.
It reminds me of a story of a local Baltimore area law firm that in a woman owned, minority owned, who first went on the internet some 25, almost 30 years. The internet's not been 30 years yet, but almost 25 years ago. And she started by giving direct content, answering questions clients would ask when they'd come in. Mm-hmm. A couple people she was working with, an advisor says, you shouldn't be answering. Let them come in. There's a law firm. Come in and ask the question. She says, no. If I'm already giving them answers for questions they have, they're going to come beneath because they know I have the answers. She was right.
Exactly.
She was absolutely right and has now built a multinational immigration law practice in the area because she provided the information that her perspective, and this is B2C, but her prospective clients actually wanted answers for.
Sure. And a lot of these things she could do repetitively, so it's really not costing her much in billable time. It's sort of, yes, it becomes a commodity, but it leads to better things.
Actually, it was just the opposite of the commodity. She created a process that it was more important for her to help people and make a difference for them. And how she did it was providing all this information. She got her fees by actually doing the work.
And they trusted her.
They trusted her because they realized that she was open and honest, was willing to share her knowledge with anybody. But the real process is the individualization of actually performing the legal services.
Sure.
She recognized that.
But you said over time she built up this content. And that's another important thing because there's so many different types of content in different formats. Video, hard copy.
Let's come back to some of that when we come back from the break that we've already gone beyond. So, and when we do come back, I will continue the conversation with Joseph Zuccaro, president of Allinio. No, I got that wrong again.
Allinio, it's
Allinio.
okay.
Allinio. I apologize.
No worries.
Joe, I'm not, but I apologize. I'm Allan Hirsh, and this is of Allan Hirsh Advisors, and this is AHA Business Radio on CBS Sports Radio, 1300 AM.
Now back to AHA Business Radio, creating aha moments for business, by business, and about business. Once again, here's your host, Allan Hirsh.
Welcome back to tonight's show. In the studio with me is Joseph Zuccaro, president of Allinio. I think I got it right.
You got it right, and just remember, it's a derivative of the Italian word for alignment.
Okay,
Allinio alignment,
which actually I had in my own commercial just a minute ago.
I just heard that, yeah.
So which made me think of it as well. So we've been talking about marketing and data, and the reason we need to collect the data in marketing. And for the listeners out there, if you have any questions, comments, want to join the conversation, give us a call, 410-481-1300. So we were beginning to talk a little bit about the content of the marketing when we had to go to commercial break. So is there anything else we have that you'd like to say about that before we go on to the next area?
Just that content it's a lot of work to create content or repurpose old content so it fits a particular buyer persona. So it, like I said, it helps them make a decision. It helps them do their job. And you want to have it in different formats. And that way you can measure, okay, what's really working? Are people listening to videos more? Or are they reading white papers? Or are they just going to website pages? But you can measure that now. So you'll know what content is working better than others based on your traffic and your analytics.
So you're talking about blogs, whether a newsletter that goes out monthly or every other week. It's an immense number, or for me, it's doing a radio show.
Sure.
Listening, trying to figure out, as we talked about, how do we find out how many listeners we have. But it's all this data that can be used to help in your marketing. So all of it, I guess, a lot of it comes to, what is a lead?
Okay. Well, if you have the luxury of actually having a marketing department and a sales department, that really has to be agreed upon, because marketing is notorious, right? I can't tell you how many times I've heard of stories where marketing hands a stack of business cards from a trade show, salespeople follow up on it, and they complain, well, 99% of the people just wanted the free bouncing ball you were giving at the trade show booth. That's not a lead. That's just a warm body that came to your booth. So what is a lead? Well, that's something you as a salesperson and you as a marketing person have to agree upon. Okay, a lead is going to be a contact that has these characteristics. Like I said, maybe title, industry, geography, size of the company, number of employees of the company, right? So all this explicit and explicit information about the company and the individual. So determining that is going to help you know what a lead is. You could have someone that's opted in.
I use the term a qualified lead.
Okay. Yeah. Qualified
because they're all leads.
Right.
But do they qualify for what you're looking for is a different story. And that's
exactly.
So you're talking about, how do you take those 200 business cards you got at a trade show or 100 business cards and determine which ones are quality leads that have to be followed up with?
You may have someone that's coming to your website every week. They've opted into your newsletter. But if you really dig down, you go, guess what? This person's just looking at our job page every week. They're probably just a job seeker, or maybe a competitor trying to measure us up on how we're growing. They're not necessarily a potential customer. So you need to be able to look at all the data and separate the wheat from the chaff, because salespeople are expensive. How many of these people do we want our salespeople calling on? Well, it's a lot easier if the salespeople know what of your digital assets a individual has engaged with. Like I said, did they register for a webinar? Did they attend a webinar? Did they look at one or two videos? Did they download a white paper? As opposed to, this person came to our website once and we've never heard from them again. Do we want to bother calling them? It's been 3 months. They're cold. We want to do something with people that are interacting with our digital assets.
But also, they might be I would think they're also interacting with, for example, you talk about a trade show. They might never have been to your website. But then before you give them the sales, I would think you'd want to have the marketing department do some research on them. You have enough data to do all kinds of research, from the size of the company, the number of employees, what products and services they sell, and this should all be put back into the data.
Sure, and you can do things like establish what's called a nurturing program. Once they've dropped that business card into, or you scan their badge or whatever, you've collected their data. You can put them on a program where you and more people know when you're given a business card, you're generally opting in. Even though they technically haven't opted in, they're opting in, and they can expect some sort of electronic communication from you. So you start them on something. Oh, here's a follow-up. Thank you for coming to the trade show, or thank you for coming to the webinar you never came to before. Thank you for interacting with us. Here's more information, and you just give them more breadcrumbs and see if they eat. Breadcrumbs.
Some people call them drip campaigns, for example, where you start sending them your email newsletter.
Exactly.
And I do it when I get at a network or a trade show, and I add them to the mailing list to promote the radio show.
And the important thing is to have a call to action. In your case, the call to action is listen in Tuesday at 6:00. But you may have something else. You may have another speaking engagement. Call for this, call for that.
Right.
You want to make sure you're prompting people to do something very gently, but you're still trying to get them to do something else so you can measure it.
Okay, so how do and you talk about something, the implicit versus explicit behaviors and demographics, and how does that all play in with all of this?
Well, once again, having if I tell you my name is Joe Zuccaro, I'm a president of a company, I'm based in Baltimore, Maryland, right? There's all this explicit stuff. It's very dry. It's immutable. You can't change it. That says nothing about what my needs are or what my intent is. Okay, I may not tell you what my needs are. I may not tell you what my intent is, but you can still determine that based on my behavior. If I go to your website and I go to certain parts of your website and I engage with different parts of your content. So if I come to your website and you offer product A and product B, and I go to the product A page all the time, well, guess what? Joe must be interested in product A. So that's implicit. I'm not stating it. I'm not sending you an email. I want product A, but my behavior is showing it. It's just like in a department store.
And there's also something that I talk about, and Apple's a great example. It's not necessarily what the customer needs, but what they want. And that, if you can figure that out too.
Yeah.
For example, people stand in line to get the new Apple phone. They don't need a new phone.
No.
They want a new phone.
Most of them don't.
Most of them don't, but they want it. So they're there to get it. And there's a culture or branding that's built around that whole process that Apple has developed over the years through the way they market.
But what happens when they walk in, whether they go to the website, but they walk into an Apple store, right? You go in the Apple store, on the right are the iPads, on the left are the phones, further back are the computers, even further back are the accessories. You can watch, where do people go first?
That's right.
And that's what you're doing with these new marketing automation tools, measuring what are people doing first when they come to your website. What are they doing next? What are they doing in repetition? So that's the kind of thing that...
And that's what they need, and that's the kind of wants that they're looking for. So we come back to this whole thing. Here we are with these leads that are not necessarily qualified. So how does sales and marketing, and what do you recommend, sales and marketing, how they have a clash sometimes they have a clash of character, a clash of what their responsibilities are.
Sure.
So how do we overcome that, and how do business people overcome that in order to get the best results out of use of all this information?
Once again, sales and marketing have to agree on what type of contact, qualified lead, that marketing is going to hand over to sales. Now, I gave you the story of the business cards, and the salespeople say half the people wanted the bouncing ball. But the other side is marketing says, we got you all these leads, but you didn't follow up on them, you didn't close them, you ignored them, whatever. So you do have this sort of tension between the two departments. But what you need to do is agree upon what constitutes a qualified lead, then give it over to sales. Sales has a choice. They can follow up on it. A sales manager can assign it to the best rep or whatever, but someone has to follow up on it.
Absolutely. And I need to go to the next commercial break. We come back, we'll continue the conversation on marketing data and how to use it with Joseph Zuccaro, president of Allinio. I'm Allan Hirsh of Allan Hirsh Advisors, and this is AHA Business Radio on CBS Sports Radio, 1300 AM. I'm going to continue my conversation here with Joseph Zuccaro, president of Allinio. And it's been very interesting. I've had learned quite a bit. But one of the things you talk about is lead scoring. And can you explain that to me? So that's something I haven't heard about.
Yeah, it's a concept. You ask, when do you give a qualified lead over to sales? Well, with marketing automation, you have a model called a lead scoring model, which basically, based on the behavior and based on the explicit information, you can assign points to all the different types of data. So if say someone's a president, you give them 10 points. If someone's a manager, you give them 3 points. And it all adds up based on all the different data you're collecting about them and the different data that you're tracking with their behavior. At a certain time, over time, when they've done enough interaction with your digital assets and they've given you enough information, their score rises, and when it approaches a certain threshold, that's when you hand them over to sales. Now, I'm making this very simplified, but with a marketing automation platform, you can do this automatically. You don't have to sit there with a little checklist. The platform does it for you based on this person's visit to the website, based on whether or not they downloaded the white paper, based on whether or not they gave you a title which is of importance to you, all sorts of things. It could be based on a certain company. You may have a target list of certain companies. If the company is A, B, or C company, then give them an extra 20 points. So all this is baked into the capabilities of the marketing automation platform, and it can trigger an alert to a salesperson the minute that a contact to a visitor to your website exceeds a certain threshold of points.
So, how do you go about planning for all of this marketing? You're talking about all this marketing automation.
Sure.
It sounds to me like there's a hell of a lot. Excuse me. There's no 7-second delay on that, huh? There's a lot of information and there's a lot of planning you have to do.
Sure.
So what does it take? What's some of the things you have to consider in trying to set up this automation for marketing?
Sure. First, I want to say that it's developed over the past few years. There are all sorts of sizes of platforms for all sorts of sizes of businesses. There's very expensive ones, and there's very affordable ones for smaller businesses. But the bottom line is that there's two things I like to tell my customers. One is the dirty little secret of marketing automation is it doesn't reduce work. It actually makes a lot more work, but it does things at a scale you could never do before. But ultimately, the other thing I tell people, it's software. Okay? If you do not plan for a software implementation properly, it can fail. And you might blame it on the software and throw your hands up and give up. But you need to plan, because it's no different from planning for accounting software or HR software or manufacturing software, et cetera. You need to plan what you're going to do with the software.
And one of the things I talk about a lot is you make the system fit your business.
Right.
You don't make your business fit a system, because it'll fail.
And right.
If you take something that exists and you try to change your business to fit it, it's tremendous change that's not going to work. You have to understand your business and build a system around your needs. And
Exactly.
when you do that, you have a much higher percentage of success.
Now, there are platforms out there that are very, very versatile and do a lot of neat things for you. Some of them, I've had clients that hardly use the capabilities of them all. It's as if they should have just stayed with their simple email service provider, because all they're using on marketing automation is for blasting out emails. Well, it can do a lot more as far as tracking and scoring and triggering other workflows within your organization. But once again, yes, you're right. You got to plan for it. You got to get executive buy-in. And ultimately, you have to train people on it properly. Another pitfall of marketing automation is it's still relatively new. And if you trust your platform to one person and they quit, all of a sudden your marketing is dead in the water. So you have to be very careful about cross-training and making sure that you have a platform that there's talent out there.
It's no different than if you were a manufacturing
Exactly.
something and you have this specialty line that fills bottles. Mm-hmm. If you only have one person that knows how to operate it and they leave, you're in trouble.
Right.
So it's no different than, from an operational point of view, having one bookkeeper, the only one knowing how to do the bookkeeping, mm-hmm. Or run a machine in the manufacturing plant. You have to make sure that you're cross-trained, even if the owner has to step in for a month.
Right.
Which I don't recommend, but you have to make sure that because that data keeps coming in.
And the other thing, back to the planning, as long as you plan properly, it shouldn't be that hard to figure out how things were being done. If you do it haphazardly, if someone else has to take the reins to the marketing automation platform, they're going to be digging through trying to figure out what the heck was going on. Because there are a lot of moving parts to marketing automation.
And I'm sure there one of the other things is developing and a process manual, which you should have a lot of things, so that if someone is coming in new, they at least have a reference point of how to use what's there.
That's part of the planning. Part of the planning. Make sure you have all these workflows down. It's systems analysis. It's what is the flow of data? Who needs to see it? When does it need to be at a certain place? That's what it's all about.
Just want to remind everybody, the trivia question is, how long does it take sunlight to reach the Earth from the sun? So please give us a call, 410-481-1300, or if no one calls, I guess I'll have to use it. But no, I will give it away next week. But please give us a call. Love to give you out that gift certificate. Anything else in the planning process? We've got about 2 or 3 minutes before we end. Joseph, anything you want to add?
If you have an organization that's large enough to have a separate marketing and sales department, you need them both as part of this planning department, because marketing, once again, is handing over the data to salespeople. So you have to have all those processes in place. What happens, like I said before, if salespeople don't follow up, or they follow up but nothing happens, the customer never returns the call? Well, you need a process to get that information about a prospect back into the marketing side, so they can hopefully run other nurture or drip programs again. So that's an important thing to do. But even for smaller organizations, I hinted before, there are smaller platforms that can be operated by a one-person firm. Okay, they're a lot less expensive. They don't have quite the capabilities, but they do things that you couldn't do 10 years ago. And so the important thing to remember is there's a marketing automation platform for your size of business. And yes, you can do certain things to customize it so it fits your needs. It can't do everything, but it can do a lot of things that in the past have been very, very repetitive and take up a lot of your time.
Two things along the planning process. One is continue thinking about what it is you need for your business to create a system that fits that. And number two, to me, it's so much, this planning process is about strategic thinking. It's about smart planning, and both on the management end, the marketing end, and the sales end, is setting goals.
Sure.
Setting goals, making sure they're measurable, making sure they're achievable, who's responsible for them, and creating a time system so that you know what's happening, and if you have that kind of thing, you can hold your staff, your people, the systems analysis that are putting the system in, you can hold them all accountable when you have goals that are measurable and time sensitive, to make sure they're accomplishing what you need them to accomplish.
Sure. The other thing I want to mention as we wrap things up.
We need about 5 seconds, 10 seconds.
Make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into, and give me a call, www.allinio.com.
And if they want to call, what's the number to reach you?
410-929-7644.
And again, Joseph, I want to thank you very much for being here this evening. I've learned tonight. I hope the listeners out there will have another one. I want to thank my producer, Logan Levy, who makes sure everything on the board works, because I have no idea what goes on over there. I'm Allan Hirsh of Allan Hirsh Advisors, your host. To reach me, call 443-977-4500 or visit my website, AllanHirshAdvisors.com. You can also listen to the podcast of all the past shows at AHA Business Radio. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. This has been AHA Business Radio on CBS Sports Radio, 1300 AM.